Down the right field line, pretty well hit. LaVarn way is the right way here tonight.
Yogi Berra said it's 90% mental, the other half is physical. My name is Ryan LaVarnway, Major League catcher and minor league grinder, and I've spent the last 15 years playing professional baseball while evolving my mindset. I'm fascinated by optimizing that 90%. In this show, I'll talk to elite athletes and mindset coaches about what makes them tick and how they've overcome obstacles in their own careers on the way to finding success. This is Finding the Way. Hey everyone, welcome. This is Finding the Way. I am Ryan LaVarnway, and today I am joined by Kevin Youkilis, 3-time Major League All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, Gold Glover, American League Hank Aaron Award winner, and Boston Red Sox Hall of Famer, former teammate, former coach, Uke. So happy to have you. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, good morning, bud. Happy to be here.
So there's so many different places we could start, and you have such a storied career. You're known for so many wonderful things that I think my audience could benefit from. But I think I want to start with the Moneyball and the Greek god of walks. This was something that was not valued in baseball for a long time. And you basically changed the way that not only players play the game, but that front offices and teams evaluate players and things that they value. Was this something that you just did naturally, or was this something that you started to see coming? What made you really focus on your on-base percentage and walks? And I know that you were not trying to walk, but you had such a good eye as you were trying to hit the ball and hit home runs, extra base hits. Walks just ended up happening.
Yeah, I wish I could be the one that says that in my mind, I came up with this brilliant philosophy. But, you know, it's funny how the whole Moneyball came around. The whole book, the whole movie, the whole premise of it. We always laugh. I think the funniest part about Moneyball is they never talk about the pitching staff that was on the Oakland A's. Yeah, and as much as you can put a lineup together, we all know one thing to be true in baseball is defense wins. You got to be able to pitch the ball. You got to be able to catch the ball. But the game did change from a front office standpoint, I think. I think it was one of those things that they kind of latched on to certain players. And I was one of them, I guess, in that way. But no, it was all natural because the name of the game is to score runs. So how do you score runs? You have to get on base. You got to drive in runners, which is a whole nother story that we can get into on another topic about how RBIs are not they're kind of discounted now, which I totally drives me nuts because I think it is an art. There's guys that can calm down in the batter's box that know that these are certain players that don't let the anxiety get to them. It's just they have a normal at bat with guys on or with runners off. And I think for me, my whole objective was always okay, have a good at bat. How do I get on base? How do I help my team? How do I drive in runners? And there was times where the Moneyball, like how it got where I was walking, where my coach was like, hey, we want you to be a little bit more aggressive here because you might be our best opportunity to drive in some runs. So it was a little bit of balancing and understanding all of that. And just, you know, through 162 games or 144 in the minor leagues, there's a lot of learning and understanding of what you need to do to be the best you. And the best you helps a collective whole. And I think that's the one thing in baseball that they try to build a team aspect, but the team aspect has to do, and I think there's many different forms that comes in, but at the end of the day, we've all known in baseball that a strong core of good individuals that work together, no different than the workforce out there in real life, that when you put a good group together that thinks individually and each unit can operate efficiently through what they do well. Mine was, I had great vision so I could control the strike zone, but I also had a plan. And I learned that plan through the minor leagues and took it into the major leagues, which really helped me. And with that plan, it got me a lot of walks, I guess, in my minor league career. And I joke, it wasn't me that was getting the walks. If you play short season A-ball and where Moneyball came after that, I had like 70 walks in short season. You realize the guys don't throw a lot of strikes. So you got to be smart. You know, you can't be trying to get hits. You got to try to just have good at bats, and then the hits will come and the walks will.
Yeah, well, I was the beneficiary of the Red Sox changing their mentality around the Moneyball and around you being the Greek god of walks. I came up and I ended up playing in the big leagues with you for 2 seasons before you ended up getting traded away from the Red Sox. But all through my minor league career, they talked about being selectively aggressive. It wasn't about being passive. It wasn't about looking for walks. You're trying to be aggressive, but only to very specific pitches.
Yeah, the key to hitting is understanding yourself first, and then you have to know your strengths and what you can handle, and then it goes into what the pitcher, his strengths is and what he's doing. But it's also, hey, if this guy's throwing bowling ball sinkers away and that's not your pitch, well then don't look away, look inner half, because most of the time in hitting, what you find is, and you know this as a catcher more than anyone, is home runs are mistakes. When you drive the ball really hard, there are times that you do hit a pitcher's pitch, but those are very minimal compared to when you drive the ball and you're hitting the ball hard and you're hitting the ball out of the yard or finding those gaps. In today's world, the exit velocity is high in a lot of ways, but that is predicated on bad pitches that aren't pitcher's pitches. Now, you have to compete and you have to hit pitcher's pitches a lot of times, and that's the separator between average to great. But I think that's one of the keys that people don't, really talk about a lot of, is understanding that selectively aggressive is looking for your strength and knowing your strength. A lot of young hitters don't know that. They're just going up there trying to swing and trying to, just trying to survive half the time too, and not strike out.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I want to double click on something you said a second ago of baseball being a team sport, but having, as a team sport, teams that find success have a core group of individuals that understand themselves and are almost maybe selfish in a way. I've played some pickleball and some tennis recreationally, and the best players I've played with always say, go for every ball. Be a selfish player, because that makes the team better, and then you'll start to learn where you can pull back a little bit. You mentioned a little bit of what makes you your best. Are there some other individuals that were different than you and maybe had a mindset that you can share that isn't necessarily specific to baseball, but that people in any walk of life could take and use to make their teams better?
Yeah, I think a lot of teammates I had their own personalities, which also dictated a little bit in how they operated and how they worked, and knowing what you're going to get out of each individual. To be a really good leader, it takes many different forms. I think there's the vocal leader. I think there's some that are the methodical leader that understand, like, hey, like, yeah, this guy over here can be kind of a pain in the butt in whatever shape or form, but we need this guy on our team. And then this guy is the glue to this team, but he might not be the guy that's going to drive in the most runs, or he might not do that, but he serves his role. I think Jason Varitek is a really good example of a leader that wasn't very vocal, but his leadership came in the way he handled the pitching staff. I mean, this guy wouldn't hit BP some days. So it was almost a detriment to himself in some ways. From an offensive standpoint, we would love to have a better Jason Varitek hitting a lot of times. But he took on the role of, I'm going to be, the best the assistant pitching coach to my pitchers, and trying to get them in the best frame of mind. And I'm going to offset that. And so I'm going to try to run prevent more than run produce. And I think that was one of the weird balances of life, of having a player that thought differently than that. Because most players, I mean, we joke around all the time. The reason we play a position is so we can hit. Yeah. Now, I think there are only a few guys that would say the opposite. Yep. Really love playing the field, and they weren't that great at hitters. But to get to the major leagues, you got to hit a little bit. So I think Jason was one that really stood out to me as a unique individual, and the reason he became a captain in a lot of ways. He wasn't the vocal captain, right? So, so some players I play with are joking like, how's this guy the captain? He doesn't say anything. I'm like, just wait. Just watch and follow. Just watch and follow, see what he does, and you'll get it. And I think you got the opportunity to be around him and see that. But I think his individualism was different than a lot of different than I hate the selfish mindset, the way you say it, because it's kind of like a negative connotation, right? But you got to take care of what you do. I mean, you got to prepare yourself. You got to get yourself in the weight room. You got to have the right nutrition. It's on you as a baseball player, right? And I think that's in all sports, in all facets of life, right? So, you got to get up and go to work. And if you're not bringing your A game, you're bringing down your whole entire team. So I think how you get there, how you get to work, whether it be nutrition, whether it be getting up, getting a coffee, building routines. I think everyone that provides really good leadership and good team assets start with routines and being present and building those routines. So you're never in that panic mode. I think we've all been there as baseball players, where we go up and we're like, the game just starts speeding up. And it happens in real life too. I've seen that too in the workplace, when people don't build those good routines. And I think Jason Varitek, still to this day, you watch his routines as a coach, it's amazing. Walks out at the same time to the bullpen to get guys ready. So that individual mindset, has to be applied to what you do too. I think that's the number one thing is people will tell you, as you got to do this, you got to do this. You're like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Well, take a little bit of what they're saying and apply it to what makes you the individual that you are.
I think what I hear you saying is consistency, figuring out what your signature strengths are and then doing them on a consistent basis so people know what they can count on you for and who they're going to get on a daily basis when they come to the field.
Yeah, and your brain works like that. When your brain just processes, it's a computer system in a lot of ways. From hitting, the more you see a slider, you're going to have, oh wow, your brain just picks up on that slider more. But it's also routines. If you're doing this one day and doing, you all of a sudden are building anxiety within. So those routines are a big part of the mindset, the mindfulness of understanding. In the end, everyone's at their best when they're calmer. And how do you get there is through being consistent, being on time, doing the same thing. And it's monotonous. I think that's the hardest part of being a baseball player is it's very monotonous. And some people can't handle that. They need to have different things and, the same boring thing every day. But to be great at baseball, you have to build those routines and you have to stick to what you do every single day, because you're also like going back to the team aspect is, well, everyone's got to hit within a certain window, and good teams build it right from spring training of this group hits at this time, this group comes in this, and then the hitting coaches know, and it's beautiful. When you see teams that struggle a little bit, this guy's coming in early one day, he's coming in later another day. There's no consistency or rhyme or reason, and it just brings down the team.
Well, and you talk about doing the same thing every day. It's not just baseball. People go to work 9 to 5 and do the same job for years, and it's the same philosophies and it's the same techniques of being really good at what you do, being reliable for the people on your team, whatever that team is, so that everyone knows what they could rely on you for.
Yeah, and the big one is people that really excel in real life and in baseball. I've always heard this: it's not practice to baseball players. It's an opportunity to get better. It's an opportunity to have fun, to do something you love in life. And that's where the monotonous grind of a baseball season, if you don't think of it like that, right? And you think of it as like every day I have an opportunity to come to work. I get to play it. I get to do something I love, and today might be terrible, but today might be a great day too, And I think that's the one thing is people that are really good in the workforce as well, they don't worry about all the little monotonous things, right? They just do it. They don't complain about it. They get in there, they get it done, and they go home.
So we talk about what people can count on you for, and you developed a reputation of being scrappy, gritty. You had dirt-stained jerseys. You collided with catchers all the time. I want to read this quote from your Wikipedia page because it cracked me up when I was doing my research before this pod. Kevin Youkilis excelled despite a physique that led many observers to underestimate his athletic ability. He was called a roly-poly by his high school coach, pudgy by a college coach, fat kid by general manager Billy Beane, and a thicker-bodied guy by the Red Sox scout that scouted him. Someone even wrote in the Boston Globe that he doesn't look like an MVP candidate, even though he is. He looks more like a refrigerator repairman, a butcher, or a man selling hammers behind the counter at the hardware store. And yet, you were also ranked as one of the top 50 players of your era. Where does that land for you? I see the smile on your face. I almost see the chip on your shoulder and your competitive nature coming out right now through the screen.
I just feel bad for all the people that are getting thrown into that mix. That might be like a butcher. Maybe there's a butcher that's shredded. Like he's like, I think I'm more laughing about that than like what people are saying about me, because when I was younger, I mean, that was always the thing. Scouts would tell you that you realize in life, and I got to from an early standpoint. If you really think about it, I was a teenager when all these things were labeled on me, that it was what you can't be or what you are, and you're thrown into this box. Stay in your box. You can't do this. You can't do that. A scout on scout day, I remember their timing, and we ran the 60s, and I ran a 6.9, and they all look down, and they go, and one of the scouts goes, "No way!" It's like, "No way, you just did that." He's like, "The clock's off." I'm like, shook my head. I'm like, "All right, I'll run again." 6.9. Then I was very respectful because my dad taught me to be. But at that moment, I really wanted to throw a middle finger up at every single scout right there, because not only did they question me in my baseball abilities, they were questioning me in just my physical abilities. But the numbers didn't lie. Like, if they came to watch me play baseball, if they came to watch me and really looked into what I did well, and stop looking at my unconventional, being unconventional in my setup, being unconventional as a quote unquote prototypical athletic body, because when I was getting drafted, it was 6'3", 200 pounds. You're up in the top 3 rounds. No, you just look good. And then finally, a couple years later, and everyone, I still get told this all the time, you'd have been a first rounder. And I'm like, do you mind give me some of that money back? Because that $12,000 was didn't go too far. Let's just say that. So it's one of those things where the chip on the shoulder is such a great thing to have. But I will say this: at some point, you have to balance the chip on the shoulder mentality and understand that it can go overboard. And it's actually kind of ironic too in some ways, that some people tell you that, hey man, you got to get off that chip on your shoulder. You made it. It's like, well, you're also the same guy that was a first rounder that had a different path that was hard for you. And you want empathy and understanding of, it wasn't easy for you. There was a lot of lights and a lot of cameras and a lot of pressure on you, but you don't understand the opposite. Right. And so that's the funny part about humans. I don't understand. I never lived that, but they've never lived my life. And I think that's the beauty of when you get to, like we were talking about, going back to good teammates and good teams, is they understand that. People get to understand those people and get to understand what they're about. And I was that guy that had to play with a chip on my shoulder because nothing was handed to me. I mean, I remember my arbitration case, and it's funny that you mentioned it, that, the organization put me as a poster child, but when they were fighting for arbitration, they would use things and say stuff. And my agent got the quote, of like, Kevin Youkilis is the poster child of what our hitters want to be. So that was actually one of the funnier things was a assistant to the general manager, now president of baseball operations for the Chicago Cubs, Jed Hoyer, had the case, and he had to like argue this. And then later on, Jed was like, that was the worst thing I could ever do, was I had to argue against this, knowing that this quote is out there. So it's one of those things that, I used the chip on the shoulder to my advantage, the best I could. But it wasn't always the right thing. Sometimes it went overboard, and you have to contain it. And I would always tell anyone out there that the chip on the shoulder mentality is very healthy, but it can also be very unhealthy if you let it get past a certain point. There's certain times where you have to just push it away and just let things breathe, if that's the best way to put it.
Can you give me a specific example of a time where you had the chip on your shoulder and then later you realized, or maybe you matured or grew, and maybe I shouldn't have gone so far with that, or you talk about the balance. At what point did you reach the success or reach the level of comfort in the big leagues, or make that third All-Star team, win the second World Series ring? At what point did you realize, maybe I don't need this anymore, maybe I'm the guy, and maybe I should just be the guy?
Yeah, I'm kind of a perfectionist in that from that standpoint. So it was like it was never good enough. Um, but I've also had the mentality that if you think you're good enough in life at any point, you will flatline. And flatlining is bad because there's people behind you coming up and they're peaking. They're going past you, and if you're that plateau, there's somebody trying to chase the top of that apex, and that's going to pass you by, and so you will get pushed aside. So for me, I think a lot of it was I came to a realization in baseball where being really good and making all-stars takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication. It takes a lot of like being malleable, adjustability, understanding that you still have flaws and you need to build upon your strengths. So I think I never got past that point where I knew I had to try to keep getting better and better. Unfortunately, my body, I beat the crap out of it in a lot of ways, which I'll never ever. I got asked that by reporters. Do you regret playing the game too hard? And I thought that was a ridiculous question in a lot of ways. I used to get kind of angry at it, but I did realize that yes, they're probably accurate on some of it, but I would never have had what I had if I didn't play the way I did. And I don't think our teams would have won World Series if I wasn't that type of player either. Because the guy to the right of me, on that right side of the infield, Dustin Pedroia, was the same way. We wouldn't have won those World Series if we didn't play that hard, if we didn't play the way we knew how to play. But going back to how it hurts you, I think it hurts you when you're always trying to prove people wrong. It's not you should never try to. The chip on the shoulder should be about trying to prove people wrong. It should be trying to make yourself a better person in any capacity of life. And that in itself should make people recognize that their opinion of you or their way of looking at you was incorrect. And through that, that's how you should gain your acceptance more than focusing on that individual that might have, talked a little smack about you or this or that. The one that dug at me the best was when I got rated the most over. I was in the top 5 of the most overrated players one year. Alex Rodriguez, Derek Jeter were on that, but I was up there, and I remember going, "Yeah, that was the big one for me." And that was when I made the All-Star team that year and had I think it was the All-Star team or Hank Aaron Award that year or whatever. But that was probably one of my favorite accomplishments of proving people wrong without having to be vocal about it.
Well, there's so much in what you just said that is just gold, and I want to dig into just a little bit deeper. First, you talked about Dustin Pedroia. Talk about another guy that's not going to make the uniform wearing Hall of Fame, but was just an incredible player. I think he's a Red Sox Hall of Famer. If he's not, he should be, or he will be soon.
Yeah.
But the two of you on the right side of that infield are an all-time underrated, low expectation, high-performing duo that became leaders in one of the most famous franchises in the world. So thank you for bringing him up. The other thing that I thought of when you were talking was one of the lyrics from Taylor Swift's song. It must be exhausting always rooting for the anti-hero.
Yeah.
Trying to prove people wrong all the time versus just trying to get rid of limitations that other people put on you and reach the potential and the goals that you know that you're capable of. It's two sides of the same coin, but one has more of a positive connotation, a positive energy surrounded with it, and the other one is so negative.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. And that's one of the hard things about social media today. And I say, like, to play in this era is super hard. But it's also easier in a lot of ways. I think there's so many great things that have come to the game, and they're from nutrition to all from the technology and the bats. Like, you just don't see the bats shatter like they used to. The gloves are better; they'll always keep getting better. So there's so many perks you have as the game evolves, and from from the technology standpoint, but from also the strength and conditioning to nutrition. I think that's one of those things that I look back and. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, you look back and you see how bitter guys are, and I'm like, no, like, this is a great thing. And But we never had to deal with social media. Like that's a whole nother animal that we never really had to deal with. But I also tell guys, you choose to do that. It is your choice to be on social media. You can have somebody do your social media for you. You don't have to even open up an app. You click the app. It doesn't just show up, right? You have to make an account. You have to do all that stuff. So if you're going to play professional sports and you get involved into that, you're already asking for negativity to come your way. So when people are like, well, it's my brand, I'm like, well, then go hire a brand manager. Go hire somebody that can go look at that stuff. So, I think the negativity is there in a lot of ways for the players of today, but it's also a choice. I think that's the hard part and realization is I'm super thankful we didn't have it. At the end of my career, it was there. And I remember looking at guys' tweets and they're laughing and I'm like, you guys think this is funny, but like, there's no way your brain processes like this negative stuff and doesn't consume a little bit of it, right? And so the more you keep consuming a little negativity, even if you're one of the strongest people, it's going to chip away at you and eat at you, right? And I think that's the one thing is the players of today, that's their issue is they deal with a lot of that and they're super involved in it. And I wish I could give any advice for young kids other than the fact that just don't get on it. Just don't get on it. Don't buy into it. Don't read the crap because most of the people that are writing the crap have never lived your life and never will live your life. So you're taking in all this negativity from individuals that don't even understand what you do. It'd be like you going, or like it'd be like me going and try to tell somebody in some field of work, like, oh, you got to do this, but I've never done their work, right? So I think that's one of the interesting parts of the game today. And I always say this too about Twitter. I was always like, more people have gotten in trouble and ruined their like jobs than have actually gained in their jobs from Twitter. So just be very careful and mindful to all the young players out there. It's a death trap.
Yeah, that's so true. And you are a member of the media now. You're broadcasting games for Nesson, for the Red Sox. How are you enjoying it? And do you view the game differently from up in the press box than you did on the field? Is there anything that's noticeably different about the way you see the game?
Yeah, I think the one thing, the game, well, having the new rules has been great. The pace of play has been great. I think that one of the most interesting parts of the game today that I speak on is we had to change the rules of baseball to help the game be better. But there were things that were happening in baseball for the past, let's say 7 years, 8 years, that were theories and ideas being put into motion that have now been kind of debunked in a lot of ways, right? So, which is odd in so many ways because the game evolves, the game changes, right? And you got to evolve with the game in many different ways. But there's so many little things that we learned in the 90s and 2000s about hitting, getting in better positions, and we've kind of elevated it too. So when you go back and you look in the early 2000s where batting stances started to evolve into what they are today, we learned setups, we learned all this stuff, but then all of a sudden this introduction came because people started going on videos and they started slow playing these home runs. So they'd only look at the home runs and go, oh, look at this swing. Well, look, it's getting upward. Well, it's upward when you're hitting the ball and past it. There's a downward where you start, there's a middle ground, there's an upward, and everyone was focusing on the last part of the swing and trying to get this upward swings. Well, now we've learned that the game evolved and changed because people are like, well, look at these swings. How are we going to attack it? We're going to go four-seam fastballs above the barrels, right? And then now you see sinkers that are high, right? You don't see sinkers down like we used to, right? So there's still some sinker ballers here and there, but it's just the game evolved. And so the weird thing is we implemented new rules to try to get more offense, but all along we knew that there was a philosophy that would work. Expected batting average is crazy. Like take for instance, Luis Arias is hitting 399 but his expected batting average is 341. But somebody that's hitting 210, their expected batting average is 240. So we've implemented all these equations and algorithms to, in a good way for a lot of people, like, hey, keep doing what you're doing. You're hitting the ball hard. You're getting unlucky. But then we've also downplayed somebody that is consistently getting hits in the game because their exit velocity is the lowest average exit velocity in the game, but has success. So there's a lot of craziness within the game. And the way I view the game is this: give me a bunch of guys that go out there, compete, play the game hard. Fill me, you got to have at least 3 grinders in your lineup. If you don't have 3 grinders in your lineup, you are not going to win the World Series. You got to have a couple superstars in your lineup, and then you mix and match what you need out of that, right? Within, you got to have the catchers, of course. Maybe they're defensively minded. Like a Maldonado. Who we're not even like. He's allergic to wood half the time. He's not going to get a lot of hits. I love joking about it because the guy is one of the greatest catchers, but he'll run into a ball and he'll have a big hit in a game, and that's what you need. But he's going to control the staff. And so I think that's where the game is now, where I say things are going to get a little bit different, where contact is going to play more. We found, well, it's so weird to say found. We haven't found. We've known this forever. The teams that consistently don't strike out, that put the ball in play, that give themselves the best opportunity to score more runs, win. And I think that's where I'm at with the game. I don't look down on the game. I don't look at like, oh, this, I look at it as like, okay, this is the game. These are the rules. Evaluate, analyze it. Because I don't want to get old and surly. I don't want to be that grumpy baseball guy. There are things I see that get you that honestly, the things that get me the most grumpy in the game are bad defense and bad base running. Those two I've seen the most of. And I think it starts at an amateur level where we're not attacking it. There's so many games being played. There needs to be less games played at the amateur level and way more practices. Understanding like good base running reads, understanding good fundamentals in the field, catching, throwing the ball, not creating a circus environment. So for me, the state of the game, I think, is always going to be what it is. But what I'm seeing within the game now that needs to get better, because these are the best of the best in the world. When Babe Ruth played, it's the best of the best in the world. I hate the comparisons of Babe Ruth. Like, Babe Ruth couldn't play today. Yes, he could. He could play today because he was the best then. He would be the best now. Those are the best baseball players of every generation, would play it every single time. Give them the technology, give them the resources, all that. So for me, when I call games, I think I just love just the swing, the pitch sequence. Like, hey, this guy went 4-seam up, then he buried his slider, and then he went back 4-seam, guy fouled it off, he shook, went right back to it, guy sat back a little bit, falls by his barrel. Like those little things of like, it's so fun. Like it's fun too, because I don't have to strike out anymore. So I sit back and I can go over the pitch sequencing and it's really cool. So, I think that's the best part of being a media member. I don't consider myself a media member, but I think the game is really special, and I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of the hitters come back. I think we went through an era of trying to get a lot of slug, trying to get a lot of guys that could hit the ball in the gap and hit homers with low averages. Some of these guys have high on base percentages, so it helps. But I think we're going to get back to a lot more bat to ball skills. And I think that's a really cool part of the game as a fan of hitting in general.
Yeah, I think the game's cyclical. I totally agree with you there. One last question before I let you go, Yuke. I really appreciate your time today. I ask every guest this right at the end. If you could talk to young Kevin Youkilis or a kid today in your shoes, somebody maybe not the most athletic build, somebody that maybe gets automatically limitations put on them just by the way they look, but they have big dreams. Maybe it's baseball, maybe it's something else. What would you say to them? What's your best advice?
My best advice is control what you can control. There's a lot of things in life that we can't control. Focus on the things that you can't control. I tell my kids all the time, it's attitude and effort. You can control your attitude, you can control your effort. There's going to be days where your attitude you're just going to have a bad game. Your attitude, but it's about showing up the next day and changing that attitude. You're human. You're going to make mistakes. It's not about being perfect in all these. It's about learning from your past mistakes, growing from them. I think that's one of the keys. But I would always tell any kid, listen, if you want to be better at something, if somebody says you're overweight, if somebody says you can't move, figure out how to combat that. Go get counseling on nutrition, go get counseling on physical fitness, anything you can do to get better. I'm a big proponent of it. And the bottom line is this: if you're not willing to outwork somebody, you're never going to make it to the top. So it's not about how much you work. I think that's the key to it, is understanding how to get the most amount of work that you need to be great and be efficient with it. It's not about being in the gym for 2 hours. It's about being in the gym and getting your maxed, like the max amount of ability to generate the gains of muscle, to speed, to whatever you need in an efficient amount of time. Because if you're just sitting around talking and blabbering at the gym and you're there for 2 hours, you wasted your time. Because there's another hour there that you could have focused on something else in your life. Time is money, as the old saying is said, but that is the truth of life. Be efficient, figure out how to get better, and also stick to what is best for you. There's a lot of people that you want to be that are not you. You can learn from that individual, but you have to apply it to the way your body moves, the way you go about things, and be the best individual you can be.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate that. I'm hopeful that our listeners will appreciate that and implement it in their own lives to accomplish their dreams. I am Ryan Lavarnway. This is Kevin Youkilis. This has been Finding the Way. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Finding the Way with Ryan Lavarnway. Find previous episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.